Welcome to the 5-7 podcast. I'm your host, Mike Pree, and today I have Katrina Lindley on the podcast. Katrina, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Awesome. So, Kat, could you please give an introduction of yourself?
So I'm a family doctor in Texas, and I'm actually from Croatia, but I've been in States for 20-some years. I have 5 kids. I do direct primary care, and I do some advocacy work for healthcare and veteran care.
How long have you been a doctor?
I finished residency in 2007, so practicing on my own 12 years.
Okay, how's that going for you?
Awesome. I kind of did a little bit of everything. I worked for a big corporation, hospital. I was medical director and different things. And as the healthcare environment kept on changing, more requirements, more bureaucracy, I've decided to open my own practice and do something that we call direct primary care, where patient actually pays monthly fee, membership fee, we call it, and they have. They can be seen by me for anything, for their regular checkups, for physical, if they're sick, as many times as needed, just for that monthly fee. So, for example, for children, my fees are anywhere between 25 to 75 per adult per month. So it's very reasonable, transparent. There is no extra cost. Patients like it. I love it. So it's been great.
And this goes without having to have insurance?
So it's highly encouraged that you have insurance. I don't ask you if you do or not, because I don't use your insurance for what we need to do. But this goes really well for people who have high deductible plans or short-term plans where you can save a lot of money on your primary care, because we can get work, radiology, different things for very reasonable prices. And then if you go to the hospital, you still have something as a fallback, because, primary care is not something that costs a lot of money, but if you end up in a car accident or have to have your appendix taken out, hopefully you do have some kind of coverage.
Right. And what exactly, obviously you said that you've done a lot of work. What was it about the bureaucracy that made you want to leave, that made you want to start your own practice?
So I actually recently wrote an op-ed because I've been kind of thinking about the state of healthcare in our country, especially with this push to go toward Medicare for all, which I'm totally against. So as the bureaucracy kept on increasing, we started getting more requirements. One of them was electronic medical record. And you would think by having electronic medical records, we can all communicate. We cannot, because we all have different electronic medical records. And there is more and more requirements by the insurance and CMS to fill out certain things about patient that have nothing to do with patient care. So you're increasing the paperwork part that physician has to do. This time is on the computers, it's not on a paper. But lots of times, when you go see a doctor, you can have the best doctor in the world, but you'll find, next time you go, pay attention. They'll spend a lot of time on their computer, not because they want to, but because they have to. And what I found that I spend most of my time on the computer without even looking at the patient, because I have to ask certain questions. And, none of us are typists, or I'm not great at any of that. So I have to look when I'm doing things. And I would not spend as much time with the patients, but I realized that I have an accent, so I'm going to say this wrong, but automaticon type of a thing, where I just have to put in data for someone else that had nothing to do with the patient. And I didn't like, not necessarily myself, but I didn't like what this was doing to me professionally and personally. Did
it feel impersonal?
Totally. Because half of the time when you're typing, you have to turn your back to the patient, because how are you going to type while you're looking at them? And, the table is not facing the patient, the chair is facing the patient. So anyway, and then it just started getting ridiculous. They asked us to do prior authorization on medication that costs $4 at Walmart and things like that. It was totally getting out of hand. And there were some other reasons. But I had a great friend, who was doing direct primary care, and she was trying to get me into this for past few years, and I was kind of reluctant, mainly because I did not want to go into private practice. I didn't want to be my own boss. And something kind of happened where I decided to resign. I resigned, and a month later, I opened my own practice, and I've been doing this for almost 2 years, and I've never been happier. I actually work sometimes longer, not necessarily more hours, but longer hours, because I don't come to the office unless I have a patient. So if I don't have a patient, I might go do something or spend time with my kids. But that means that if a patient calls me and they need me to see them at 9 o'clock at night, I'll go in. I've done it even, I always tell the story, it was Saturday. I was in my pajamas watching Captain America. I love Avengers. So, she needed to be seen, and she texted me on my phone, and I was like, well, I'll come in if I can come in my pajamas. And this is someone I know, plus my office is very close by. And she texted back and said, I'll come in my pajamas too. But this kind of illustrates that, doing direct primary care, patients can reach me directly. They don't have to call clinic and then go through layers of people until it gets to the doctor. And by the time it gets to the doctor, or it's already gone, patient doesn't have it, or the message you got is not really what it happened. So, it's just, for me, this has opened the venue where I know I'm doing something good, and I know I'm helping people, and it's just a relationship between them and me, and it's been awesome.
Yeah, it's using the example that you just used, I could care less, what a doctor wears, just as long as, you kind of get what you need. Do you know what I mean? It's like I'm more interested in your expertise than what you're wearing, And I think that it's a really good idea, what you're doing, because it seems I think that we're in a bit of a transition in business and in med right now, because I would say maybe 10 years ago, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, say in the business world, it became the norm that you didn't have to wear a suit to, you didn't have to wear a suit to a corporate work. Or if you're going to work for a software company, people are wearing hoodies and jeans and stuff. And things started really turning around. And then a few years after that, there was home from work started becoming more popular. And it seems like now that entrepreneurship seems to be skyrocketing, that there's people leaving their jobs and they're working on their own, and they're working longer hours, but they're so much happier in their lives doing these things than, say, doing the traditional 9 to 5. Me personally, I work for myself as well. I do IT consulting. So like you, I get to play with my kids. I get to see them in the morning, or I could do later hours, depending on, my wife normally works during the day. But it seems to really be taking off. And I would say maybe within 15 years that it's going to be more normal. I think it might be more of the norm for people to be in more of your position, or doctors in your position. I wanted to talk about the medical records because I don't really know much about it. I've done some work for some dentists, and I know that they use different dental software for Dentrix, or depending on what the company uses. Is it the same thing with the medical profession?
So we all have EMRs, and bigger corporations. There's, I would say, maybe 3 or 4 specific companies that hospitals will go with. And the idea originally was that we all were going to communicate. But then we realized that sometimes, even if one hospital has one EMR, the other one has the same EMR, they still don't communicate. Mm-hmm. So now there's lots of different products on the market. I have an EMR specifically for direct primary care that actually one of my friends and his family have created the EMR in this big company, and it's awesome for what we need. And I just, I love using it. It's very simple because it doesn't have to be complicated. But, bureaucracy, the hardest thing about healthcare, it's not me and you. You come to see me, I decide what you have, and we decide together what to do about it. it's now getting your insurance to pay for it. Sometimes even if I know what's the best thing, if that medication is not on the insurance's plan, we have to go through layers to get them to pay for it. So, for example, people who have diabetes struggle with insulin. Insulin, I'm not great with numbers, but insulin years ago was extremely cheap. And we have created some insulins that are better than others, but even they started kind of cheaper. Now these prices are like out of control. And you have especially families with younger kids who are struggling to pay for insulin, which doesn't make sense because you need insulin to survive, some of these kids. So the whole healthcare system is out of control. And these EMRs sometimes, you think they're good, but as this bureaucracy part increases, you need to start putting more and more stuff into your EMR. So I find myself, I still moonlight in urgent care and things like that. Sometimes I'm clicking so many times through like click, 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 click. But at the end of the day, like my pointer finger, like I actually get stuck from all that clicking. Because if you're doing that for 12 hours all day long, and sometimes I have to click 40 times in one patient's chart, it's just insanity of these regulations and things they ask that have nothing to do with the patient. And that's kind of what's frustrating for the physicians. Most of it is just to meet some kind of requirement, but what is that requirement doing? We don't really see any benefit on our side.
You mentioned that you favor a free market for people to have choices.
Yeah.
And now I understand that if the government decides on what the health care will be, that means that there's going to be there will not be any type of innovation. You know, you'll have one choice for healthcare, and I don't think people really understand what that means. I mean, they throw out all of the, I'm saying politicians, they point out all of like the good things, you know, like everybody will have a chance for healthcare, but they don't mention any of the things that are negative about it. Could you go over your feelings on private healthcare, private and one healthcare system?
So I am against Medicare for all. And first of all, I come from Croatia, which used to be Yugoslavia, which was a communist country, and we had socialized medicine. In my opinion, in my personal experience, that what I've seen, it doesn't really work. So currently, the Democratic people who are running for Democratic, for presidency and stuff, it sounds like it's a great soundbite. Like, everyone wants Medicare for all. Who doesn't want to have insurance and doesn't have to pay for it? But let's talk about it. For all of us to have Medicare for all, first of all, it's not going to be Medicare for all. It will be some kind of insurance is one single payer plan. For that to happen, someone has to pay for it, which means we're going to pay for it. It's going to increase all of our taxes. Every single person is going to have increase in taxes. You're going to start getting... you get this huge amount of people that have insurance all of a sudden. You only have a fixed number of physicians, nurses, pharmacists, dentists, all of us, but you're giving us a whole lot more people. What do you think is going to happen? You're going to start rationing care. You're going to start having wait lists. Who's going to put you on the wait list? Not physicians. It's going to be a bureaucrat who's going to start deciding, well, do we do a knee replacement in an 80-year-old guy who's not going to live as much, or do I put the knee replacement in a 40-year-old guy who's going to live longer? So now you start getting all these ethical questions, and who's going to make those decisions? It's not going to be you and me. It's going to be maybe insurance, some kind of bureaucrat, who knows?
A triage department.
Yeah, it's not. It sounds great, but I think people have to realize that having insurance card is not the same as having the actual care, as seeing a doctor. So the fact that you might have an access doesn't mean you're going to have the care. And, that always goes to that question, is healthcare an essential right or not? That's something that everyone has to answer personally. But in my opinion, by having a single payer, what's going to happen? You're going to increase bureaucracy. You increase bureaucracy, the quality is going to go down. There's no doubt about it. And the reason I believe in three things. I believe in consumer choice, which means you decide where you want to go for your care. I believe in free market, which means that me and the doctor next door are going to have to compete against each other to deliver you better care at lower price so that you come to one of us. And I believe in transparency. I believe in showing you exactly how much something is going to cost you so that you know when you come to me or I send you to have radiology done or labs, you're going to know how much money you're spending. And that's why I believe in free market, because free market increases competition, increases quality, and decreases prices. If you have one payer and no one is competing, the prices are just going to go up because you have nothing to compete against. They can set the bar as high as they want it.
Yeah, and you don't want to leave that into some bureaucrat's hand because you know that it's going to get high. And something else that I believe, kind of, like you, is that with the competition in the market, there's more competition for companies to come up with, better cures or better medication. If there's just one single, entity, there will be no more innovation, because obviously people are motivated by money, and I'm not saying that it's a good thing or a bad thing, but in some cases it's good. If someone's motivated by money, maybe they'll put out a better product. If there's no money out there, maybe some people aren't going to be motivated to put their best foot forward. If you say you send somebody to Walmart, okay, and they're paying $5 an hour, someone who's getting paid $15 an hour may work harder than that person who's making $5 an hour. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with you 100%. And you say the bureaucracy is a problem. If there's one healthcare system, it's gonna become even worse then.
Oh yeah, and our friends, our neighbors in Canada showed us that if they have something, I have friends who had relatives who had like cardiac issues and they needed cardiac surgery. Their choice was to wait for several months, actually, to get even tested, or just fly to United States and have it all done here. And they came here. But even take like the famous people, Michael Bublé, his son was diagnosed with cancer. He could have stayed in Canada and had everything done there. He chose to bring his son to UCLA. Even Mick Jagger had a heart surgery. He could have stayed in England and waited for the system. He came to the United States and had it done privately. So I think the systems around the world have shown us that you do start rationing care. You do start having long wait lists for procedures that are not life-threatening. So like knee replacement, I don't know how long is the wait in Canada, but if it's not emergent, the wait is going to be 6 to 9 months. So yeah.
Holy smoke.
Yeah, you can probably look it up. I really don't know the exact wait numbers, so I don't want to get in trouble. But the wait is in months. It's not like in weeks or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm going to have to look into that because from what you hear on TV, the Canadians have it all together and they have the perfect healthcare system.
I don't know. It depends who you talk to in Canada. I think, and actually this is something that I've discussed this with few friends. I think people who don't use the system in Canada, who actually don't need surgery, they probably believe that their system is pretty decent. Because I'm sure their primary care system is pretty decent. But the ones who end up needing surgeries, who actually have to use the system, always say it's not because they have to wait for it. So, everything is kind of relative in life. And it's the same thing about, people wanting socialism in this country. I lived under socialism and communism. And I think if you go to Venezuela right now and ask one of those people, what do they think about socialism? They will tell you, run as far as you can from it. And instead, we have people here saying, we can do it better because we're Americans. We know how to do it. Every society, like if you go, look at Russia. They started a socialist country. They end up communist country. Yugoslavia, I lived, so I can talk about Yugoslavia. Venezuela, other ones. All these countries have shown us that no one can do it better. And we're not going to do better. So, this idea that we all hold hands and sing Kumbaya and think that like you can own a big truck and iPhone and this and that without work. It's just a pipe dream. Like, you know, I came to United States when I was 20 some years old, and I went to college here, medical school. I paid for it all myself, and I still have some student loans I'm paying off. And I drive a big car, but I work extremely hard hours for it, and I still have student loans. People think that doctors are rich. We are not rich at all. Well, I'm not. I don't know about others. I'm sure some are. We have bills as everyone else, and our bills, for example, how many people, when they graduate college, go to work and they get this job and they start getting retirement plans? I don't even know what the retirement plans are. Because when I graduated medical school, at the end of all my years of graduation, school and stuff, I had $250,000 in debt. Who do you think is going to pay for it? Me, right?
Yeah, that's $250,000.
Exactly. And people don't realize that most physicians, and now it's even more than that, when we graduate school, we don't go to school for free like they do in Canada or England or Italy or even Croatia. They go to school for free, The government pays for it.
Is that for medical school as well?
Medical school.
Wow.
Yeah. Here, I don't know about Canada. Canada is the only one I don't know, but I do know in Europe you go to medical school for free. The government pays for it. Here we pay for our medical school, and most medical school graduates, when I graduated, I think at 220. That was my student loans. Now it's even more than that. The medical school is a lot more expensive. And people have to realize that physicians have families and everything else. So it's not that easy to make a living as a physician. And it's important to realize that, free market is the way to practice healthcare. It's not socialized medicine. Because at the end of the day, someone has to pay for it all.
Yeah, I agree. I'd love to talk about socialism, but that's like a deep rabbit hole to get into, and especially you have these Hollywood liberals, and you have people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez that think that it's so great, and it's not. And I find it really surprising that that people are saying that socialism is a good thing.
But you have to realize nothing in life is free. Like, when has anyone gotten anything for free? Even when you were a kid and your mom had to go buy to the groceries, she had to have money to buy groceries. Who will give her money? Well, she had a job to pay for her groceries. Her employer had to have some kind of product that they sold so that he can pay his employees. Socialism, it's like a dream ideal. And I'm not saying it's a bad to dream, but at the end of the day, like, unless everything's free, who's going to pay for it? Yeah. Someone has to pay for something. You can't just expect to get things for free. And when it comes to socialized medicine, VA system is an example of socialized medicine, and we're finding all sorts of issues at the VA system. So all I'm saying is people need to use their head. They really need to think about it, and just look at the history, look at the countries that have gone through it, and no one has done it. No one can do it, and we will not do it.
Yeah, actually, Venezuela is a really good example of a country that has had great oil resources and their socialist economy, and they're in a lot of trouble right now. But that's just one example to look into. I'd actually like to move on to veteran healthcare and your experience with veteran healthcare.
So I've never worked in the VA system myself, but I've seen veterans as a part of, it used to be called Pro-Choice Program. Now it's a Mission Act, where they can come to a community clinic and be seen. The VA kind of allows them 10 visits and things like that. And I just found that lots of times they were, over-medicated, taking too many medications for things that they don't necessarily need. And not all of their issues were really being addressed. And it kind of, I started getting interested in that. And I traveled to DC to do some advocacy work and different things like that. And I've spoken with several veterans and become good friends with them. And we wrote a bill maybe to help some issues, because we all know that PTSD is a big deal. Suicide, it's a huge deal. But I think what's been happening for the past 10 years, no one has realized the damage that like traumatic brain injury, the extent of traumatic brain injury in this population, especially in veterans coming from the recent wars and stuff. So they would be diagnosed with PTSD instead of TBI. So if you have a TBI, that's like a concussion. Let's call it like concussion just because it's easier to kind of grasp it. And you have symptoms of concussion, they can kind of mimic PTSD. Some non-existent mental health. Now you are going to have mental health issues because I just gave you medication and messed you all up.
Yeah.
So I think, we kind of went down the rabbit hole on that end and didn't realize until recently that we're dealing with two different things. And then, as you know, in my opinion, when you guys finish military, I don't think that there is a good enough transition system to really capture people and identify who can be at risk and make sure that they're plugged into the community right away, so that they don't end up with attempted suicide or something. Because we all can understand that probably most people have PTSD just because from the experiences that you went through. Normal brain, and when I say normal, I hate normal word, but let's call it normal. If you put someone through,
I don't think war is natural. I don't think it's a natural thing for people to see.
Especially, if you are, like I said, I wasn't in the military, but you watch enough TV and you talk to enough people. But having to watch your friends be injured or you injured or someone dying, it has to make an effect on every psyche. And if that happens over and over and over, and deployments keep on getting longer, the times in between deployments is shorter, so you have no time to really decompress and kind of get back to semi-normal. And you keep on putting these traumatic experiences into a brain, it's normal that everyone will have some kind of degree of issues with it, and maybe some people learn how to cope with it, some don't. But that's not their fault. We just need to make sure that we give them tools to cope with it. And I don't think we've been good at giving them tools to cope with, so you end up with a suicide. And one thing, I actually hate number 22 because number 22 is a lie. Number 22 is based on retrospective study. I forget the timeline, but it was like, I can't tell you exactly, but it was done like several years ago. I believe it was 10-year period, and it was done by coroners. So what they looked at is that the suicides of people who they knew were veterans and who they knew they killed themselves, usually with like a gun or something, firearm or something, or if I don't know, if they jumped off the bridge but they knew it was a veteran, that would kind of be counted. But it's very like specific parameters. And they came up with a number, actually 20.67, I want to say. So that did not include people who were not identified as veterans. That did not include people who it looked like an accidental death, but they really drove off the bridge because they were drunk and they couldn't deal with their life. I'm trying to say that number was not, it did not include all the parameters. So the number 22 is actually probably, I believe it's a lot larger than 22. And I also feel that like people hear number 22 all the time. And if I hear blue, 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 blue all day long, I kind of become desensitized to blue. So when the people hear number 22, like, 22 veterans kill themselves a day, they probably start saying, I feel sorry for them, but let me go back to my life. Right. It doesn't have an impact anymore because we have heard it so many times. I think like we need to figure out a better way to reach the public, to explain to them that no matter what the number is, even if the number is one, that's one too many.
Yeah.
So, I'm not against number 22. Well, maybe I am a little, just in a sense that I think that, and I don't want to use the word no one cares because it's not true, but people have become desensitized to it and it doesn't have an impact anymore. I think, and my personal feelings is we should get away from that number and just say one is too many.
Yeah, it seems that, most guys, excuse me, most guys, when I got out, I didn't go to war, but when I got out, it's just like you're in the military one day and then the next day you're out of it, and you come from this world of incredible structure and purpose. And, what you're doing is bigger than what you are. And then you get out and like, there's none of that. I had a plan. So for me, the transition was easier, but guys who are just looking to get out and they're just doing whatever, I can see how it's like such a jarring experience, coming into the civilian world, because, when you come into the civilian world, it's a world of largely undisciplined people that go through their thing. The big things in their life are, like they had a longer line than normal at Starbucks, and, I remember one day I was outside, when I was in Korea, I was outside my room, I was smoking a cigarette and having a beer with a friend, and someone came over and they mentioned that a guy who we had served with, who had been in Korea with us, died. And he had just left a couple months earlier, and he went to Iraq, I believe. And, when you think about that stuff, that's just one instance. When you're hearing about your friends dying, it wears on you. It's like, oh man, that's unbelievable. Yeah, sure, we all volunteered and it's what we signed up for. But, civilians don't really have that kind of reality. It's different when you hear about someone who, someone died in a car crash that, but they were drinking and driving. It's like, okay, it's sad, but these things do happen. And yeah, it does happen in war, but it's completely unnatural than, leading a normal life, and people see veterans on the outside and they look whole. They have 2 arms, they have 2 legs, and, they don't have any visible scarring, but underneath, there's a world of hurt that people don't really understand. And it's getting to that world of hurt and letting them know that, everything's going to be all right. There's a woman on Facebook. Her Instagram name is BRB Massage, and she is doing what she believes is that human touch is helping veterans. It's showing them through massage, and she posts things about, what dopamine does and what it does to your brain and things like that. And she's actually a really cool page to follow, because she's talking about how human touch is helping guys, and I totally agree. Because have you ever read the book? I think it's called the 5 or 7 Love Languages.
No.
Okay, it's about this guy. He wrote a book, and he's talking about the different love languages and how people experience love. So one of them is acts of kindness. So let's say, for instance, your spouse is their love language is acts of kindness. So if you, I don't know, say you clean the bathrooms or you do something for them, that is their love language. And what they have is like it's like a pool, and you kind of have to fill that pool up with water, but the water is love. And what you want to do is you want to keep the pool filled with love, because when it goes all the way down to the bottom, then there's emotional issues. Another one is physical touch, and I consider myself one of those people. Like, I like to, if someone does a good job, I give them a pat on the back or a high five or something like that. Like, my daughter's a really good example of it. She's physical touch, because if you when she's uncomfortable with things or she's like upset, if you rub her arm a little bit with your thumb, it like calms her down. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but that's an example. And her talking about physical touch through massage, helping veterans, I think that it has a lot of merit, because it shows someone that they care. Because typically we're not the type of guys to go and hug each other and, rub each other's shoulders and stuff like that. So when they start getting that kind of attention, not that they're seeking attention, even though that they need it, it's beneficial to them. In saying that, I think that I've heard that I'm not in the veteran healthcare system, and I've never sought care in the veteran healthcare system. Do you have any stories to share about, say, like what these guys go through?
No, I don't have any specific stories other than, seeing them as their physician and kind of dealing with different issues. But, when it comes to touch, I'm a DO, I'm a osteopathic medical doctor, and we're kind of taught from day one to touch the patient. And exactly like she said, when you touch a patient, sometimes you can even talk to them and you just hold the shoulder and things like that. It makes a difference. So as far as like the VA, I know from my patients that I've seen, lots of times, they will not necessarily, they're not seen by the same physician. So there's really no relationships that you can create. And even from my friends who actually work at the VA, some of them are overwhelmed with the numbers of patients they see. And if they want to do certain things, they might not be able to because that's not how it's done. So there's like both sides to those stories. I just feel that the system itself is not really created to individualize treatment for a person, because everyone is a little bit different. Like you said, someone needs touch, someone doesn't want to be touched. But if you don't have time to spend with them, you'll never realize, so you'll never create that relationship. The most important thing in medicine is, I call it this sacred relationship is between me and my patient, because if my patient trusts me, they'll do what I ask them to do. So when they come to me and they say, I need an antibiotic, and I say, no, you don't, because it's a viral illness, they'll listen to me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But if there's someone that doesn't trust me and I don't give them antibiotic, next thing I know, they're going to write a review on some kind of website to say I'm the worst doctor ever because I wouldn't give them antibiotic, and they know they need one. Yeah. The patient will never do that because they trust my judgment and I trust theirs. So the most sacred relationship you can have is that trust. The VA system in itself is difficult to create that trust because you just don't spend enough time, and you will change providers all the time. Lots of times you're seen by a nurse practitioner, not necessarily a physician as well. And I've heard stories of some being seen by psychologists and they gave them medications. In general, psychologists do not prescribe medications in normal world. At the VA system, supposedly they do. How true is that? I don't know, because you know how it is with these bureaucracies. You hear stories, you never know who's telling you what. And all I know is that I have a friend in Arizona who was seeing, he was actually seeing a psychiatrist, and he kept on having, I've connected with a lot of veterans on Instagram, and I'm the type of person, I think you can see from my posts, that like people can kind of send me a message and I always respond. And so I've created this network of friends. Some of them I haven't even met face to face. It's mainly through phone or something. And they'll sometimes text me and ask me advice. And, I have one of them in Arizona who was being seen by a psychiatrist at the VA system. And you would think that this doctor would be able to help him. But this friend of mine was really struggling. He was suicidal. We went over the medication list, and I gave him several suggestions on how to change them. And he asked that physician to change it. He wouldn't do it. And he was giving him one medicine for this, one medicine for that. And, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I do use some of those medicine. And the ones that you don't use, you can look them up yourself. So I made him look it up with me. And both of us saw that medication is not doing what the doctor is saying, because it's not supposed to do. It's actually doing the opposite. But my point is, like, I don't want to blame anyone specifically, because who knows? All I know is I see those end results where people are not doing well. And I think the people are not doing well because no one is listening to them. And sometimes you just have to listen to a person. I had several guys where based on their posts on Instagram, I knew that something was going on with them, and I would send them a text and just say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And then they say, "Well, I had a nightmare or whatever." And I remember being in Walmart doing grocery shopping and kind of talking with him about different things. And we started talking about cooking and stuff like that. And he kind of got out of that mood. Sometimes it's just, spending some time and not giving medications all the time. And I think that's what happens. A lot of times people go down these rabbit holes, and you have this symptom, you have this meds, you have this symptom, you have this. So you end up with like 20 medicine. I can't remember take one, first of all, myself. And I know when I'm taking something that I should be taking it. So you have someone taking 20 medications, and some of them are 2-3 times a day.
Wow.
Actually, I do have an example for you. Now I just remembered it. I have a friend who's one of his soldiers in his unit. When they came out and stuff, he actually killed himself. He was going to the VA. He was taking 122 pills a day. The friend told me a story. The wife called him, and the guy killed himself. The wife remembers she was sleeping in bed. She remembers her husband coming to give her a kiss at night, and she thought that, he's going to go watch TV or something. Next thing she knows, she woke up to the sound of a gun. This person was seeing a VA, getting 122 medications a day. He was taking 122 pills a day. I don't know how many medicine that was altogether, because some of them are 3, 4, 5 times a day. But when you take even 3 medicine, they all interact.
Yeah.
When you're taking that many, there's no way in hell they're not interacting. And you can take a person who was, again, this normal word, semi-normal, to not being crazy, but being overly medicated, not being able to deal with side effects of the medications. And then you start having these thoughts that you're not worthy, you don't have a purpose. I think that's the biggest thing. I think purpose is what is lost the most. Feels like maybe he's not a good husband, good dad, good worker, good this. And then he's like, you know what, I'm going to kill myself because my wife's life is going to be better. On the other hand, it's not, because now she's missing someone who she loves. And so I think our job as a society is to say it's okay to feel whichever way you feel. There's nothing wrong with your feelings. Let me figure out how to help you. And that can be sometimes medicine if you need them, sometimes no medicine. Sometimes it's me finding your job that you like from a friend because that friend had it. Or sometimes it's you love music, we sit together and play guitar. I think we just need to acknowledge that it's okay not to feel okay.
Yeah.
And then, give someone a lending hand, whatever that lending hand is, and there's different ways of doing it.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's a guy named Matthew Schallert. He was a Air Force PJ, and he's on Instagram as well. And he created a foundation. It's called the Beyond the Surface Foundation. And what he does is he takes veterans on a retreat, and they go kiteboarding and they play water sports and stuff like that. But the idea is to get them immersed in water. And he does yoga. Yoga is also a big part of it, and he does these things with them. And I think the idea behind it is to give them an idea of when you're not feeling well, or maybe like a purpose to do something that you can use if you're having negative feelings, to try to keep you, I would say, in the green than in outside, like in the red.
And I think, we need to teach the veteran himself, herself, what the warning signs are, their family, their friends. And then when you start feeling like it's getting out of control, they need to feel comfortable to reach out. And that's why you have all these different groups that are doing different things. Like we have a group, a bunch of guys that's here in my general area, and they're really awesome. They're called Vets Extreme. They're also on Instagram. But they take guys hunting here in Texas for, I'll say it wrong. I think they're like wild pigs, hogs, I don't know. But they do these like big hunting things, and it's their time to do bonding. And recently, a few months back, they had I was there. It was really cold. I was just sitting and watching them. But they had a big. They were in a gun range, and they did a competition. And it's just that sense of community back.
Right.
And, you know, there are different ways of doing it. There is yoga, there is music, there is hikes, there is hunting trips. It's not one size fits all. I think that's what we need to realize, that all these veteran organizations, they all have a purpose and they're all doing a great job, because there's no one size fits all. What works for me might not work for you, and that's totally fine. But our job is to, you know, figure this out and catch people before they start spiraling down, because what ends up, they end up homeless. You know, they end up losing their families. They end up getting into substance abuse, alcohol, and then they end up killing themselves. And I think, like, that's why I say I don't like number 22, because even number 1 is one too many. No one should feel desperate enough that they have to kill themselves. If there is one person that feels that way, that means we're not doing our jobs. And it's not even physician job, it's your job and my job and everyone's job. We all have a and the first part is just to say it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
You know, I posted, I think yesterday on my Instagram, something about, I know this happens to women a lot, where like on the outside you're great, but inside you're crumbling down. And then you go into a room and cry. We allow ourselves to cry. Guys don't. There's nothing wrong with crying, you know, like we need to, and it's not like, and I'm not talking about this new millennial thing that we're raising, we're like all freaking out. No, like even for the most stoic guy, if there is a need to cry, the crying itself releases the neurotransmitters, and it truly makes you feel better. It means, like, sometimes like you have that crying fit for 2 minutes, and after that you feel like, okay, now I can do what I have to do.
You know what? I think women in general, they experience their emotions and they accept their emotions way better than guys do. You know, I think guys in general, we try to suppress emotions, and we don't experience them in the right way.
And it's okay, you know, I'm not saying that like you guys have to cry, but what I'm trying to say is, like, at some point you have to stop lying to yourself. You have to say, you know what, I'm having a crappy day. And it's I'm having a crappy day. You know, tomorrow's going to be better. Tonight I'm going to sit in front of TV and watch football until I can't watch it anymore. But like, at least in your mind, give yourself a break if you don't want to do it on the outside. And that's, you know, we have to start as a society saying, it's okay, take a time out. Take the time out, whatever that time out is for you. You know, going out for a run, go out for a run. You know, whatever it is, just try to stay away from like drowning your sorrows in alcohol and substance, other, you know, illegal drugs and different things like that. Because then when you start spiraling, you start with little, and it ends up more, and you reach a point where it's very difficult to, you know, everyone can be rehabilitated, but you reach a point where you don't realize you have a problem, and it becomes more of an issue. So it's the whole PTSD, whatever issues, it's not a one-person problem, it's a community problem. It's all of our problems.
You mentioned that you were working on a proposal, trying to make a bill. Could you talk about that? So,
you know, I'm type of a person, I'm actually an introvert, which is really funny because you can't really tell anymore. I've adjusted myself to, like, at the end of the day, I crash and I don't want to talk to anyone. But during the day,
that's enough.
So I've been fortunate enough to meet, you know, a lot of amazing people. And you know, I met Boone Cutler, and through Boone, I worked with Carl Mungren, and Boone knew that I wanted to do something for veterans, and he knows I love advocacy. I like legislation and stuff like that. And he was, and now we were like, let's write a bill. And the idea was, you know, they're the ones that gave me the background for the bill. I kind of wrote it out, and then they took what I wrote and reworked it. So we have this thing that all three of us contributed and made. But the idea is, and the guys really explained to me, so when you guys transition, when you're still active duty soldier, and you're thinking about transitioning to civilian life, and let's say you're stationed in Georgia, you do all your transitioning in Georgia, right? You do your resume writing. They hook you up with maybe the VA or different groups, or maybe you go to a job fair or whatever. The transition is done by TAP, whichever way is done. But it's all done right there in Georgia, right? So you're done. You get your DD 214, right?
Yeah, DD 214.
There you go. Guys always laugh at me because I always forget the numbers. But anyway, so you get all the stuff, and then you're done, and you go on up, and you go back to Texas. You just probably wasted 6 months of your life because you went from Georgia to Texas. Nothing that happened in Georgia is going to work in Texas. So our idea is for people who want to go back home. So let's say you were in Georgia, you want to go to Texas or whatever, that you do transitioning at the base that's closest to your home. Mm-hmm. So that you can get plugged into the system as soon as possible.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Because the VA system in Texas is not exactly the same as the one in Georgia, although it's like a federal, but it's really not, because they all kind of work in their own silos. So those things are different. And then job fairs, employers, different things, you want to get plugged in right there where you're going to be working. And then there is opportunity for veteran groups like Vets Extremes and stuff to actually pick you guys up right away in your own state and start creating relationships so that you don't feel like you've lost buddies and stuff like that because you left online. So the idea is to do transition where you're going to end up so that hopefully there is better support and there is less risk of you falling through the cracks, not getting a job, becoming homeless, getting into substance abuse and other issues. The idea is just to kind of start this process a little bit different. And eventually what I would like to do is actually take the TAP program and make it a whole lot better. But that's something that that's a goal in life, that knowing me, I'll get to it. But my point is we can definitely make it better, but that's not what we're trying to do. Our first step is let's do it where you want to go so that we can plug you into home state as soon as possible so that you can start having relationships again and that you don't feel like you lost purpose and that you lost your tribe. Because I think from talking, especially to the younger veterans, I see a lot of veterans from the Vietnam War and stuff like that. I think those issues are different. I think someone like your age, what I find is they don't have a purpose. They've lost that sense of tribe. They kind of feel on an island while everything else is happening around them. They don't know how to process it. So I think if we plug them in as soon as possible where they're going to live, there's going to be a chance that they will be able to reintegrate better.
Yeah, I agree. Alcohol is just such a, it's one of those things that,
everyone, even physicians, a lot of physicians have those issues.
Right. And it's it's easy to kind of overlook, it's oh, okay, just having a beer, you can't say you can't have a drink. Do you know what I mean? But it's when it starts getting abused when you should probably say something. But then at the same time, it's, it could be somebody just working through something, but where's the line? Where's the line of somebody like this guy needs help, or it's maybe this guy can work it out. I think it's drawing that line is really difficult.
It is. And actually, maybe we can do another podcast down the line, but you and I are friends on Instagram and Facebook. So I don't know if you saw one of the posts recently. I've recently been asked to be president on Project Shot at Dawn. I have several veteran things I do, but this is going to be my third or fourth one. But that one is also amazing because this one allows for those risk factors to be seen, for active military even to be to be able to identify what those risk factors are, and not to deny them and kind of gloss over them, but to actually make everyone aware of them and start dealing with them as soon as possible. Because it's like you said, you start with one beer is okay. Next thing you end up, you start drinking 10 beers at night. 10 beers are not at night are not okay for anyone.
Yeah.
Um,
Especially if it starts off with 10 beers with your buddies, and then the next thing you know, you're sitting in a dark room, drinking 10 beers by yourself.
exactly. So I think like we need to start identifying all those issues as soon as possible and dealing with them. And it doesn't have to be in a bad manner. It's just like you have a friend talk to a friend. So I think it's really important just to stop denying what's happening.
Yeah.
And kind of take the bull by the horns, as they like to say in Texas, and deal with these issues, head on, because you can keep your head in the sand, or you can deal with it. And if you deal with it, then we're not going to have loss of life. And that's, at the end of the day, loss of life is unacceptable. And again, I'll go back to that one. We lose one person, that's one too many. Yeah. I don't care what the number is. I don't care if the number is 22, 15, 13, 10. One person is too many. So we as a society, you and I and all our friends, when you have that one friend that like he texts you every single day of the week, something's wrong. Call him. It's your job as his friend to call him and say, hey, what's going on with you? Because something's going on. And if you do that, if you call that person, maybe you can, save his life, because maybe he is down spiraling.
Right.
And I keep on saying he. It's not a he. It's a he and she.
Right.
It's.
I use it as a loose term.
No, I know, but it's like it's a society problem. It's not, and I think that's what society has lost. Like they think like, oh, this is a veteran problem. It's not a veteran problem. First of all, it starts in military most likely. It's all of our problems. It might have started even before military, but then you kind of flew under the radar and something happened and it kind of got exacerbated. It's all of our problem. It's a human problem.
Yeah, I agree with you, because I mean it is a military problem because it starts there, and it's a civilian problem because guys end up in the civilian world, and the military needs to be prepared to take care of these guys for the transition, and in a way the civilians need to accept those people and give them a place in society that's that's suitable for them.
I was not in the military, so hopefully I can't get in trouble with anyone. But in my opinion, the problem starts in military. And again, I have no firsthand experience. This is just from talking to different people, listening to different stories. These things probably start even during training for some of you guys. But it's swept under the rug. And then when you guys get injured, who started pain medications? Started in military. Mm-hmm. Now you come out and you keep on going and going and going. So yes, we need to. I think what we can do is do our part on the veteran side, but eventually there's going to have to be a conversation with DOD and stuff. And I know that's like people always say, "Don't talk about anything bad." It's like yeah, but it's like the problem doesn't start when you become a vet, when you're a veteran, when you leave. The problem has started a long time ago. Mm-hmm. We're just catching you now here. And I think lots of issues between like VA and military. Military likes to say it's your problem. VA likes to say, no, it's your problem. No one wants to acknowledge it's all of our problems.
Right.
And whether you're a veteran or not, you became veteran because you went into the military first, right? So it always started there. It didn't start when you got out. It started there. So I think we just need to. Eventually, that's conversation that we will have to have. I don't think people are ready, although I feel they're a little bit more ready than they were before. But, one thing at a time.
No kidding. Well, you know what? I'd like to thank you for coming on. I'm very appreciative. It was a great podcast and very enlightening, and I was really looking forward to this. And but I wanted to thank you again for coming on. Could you give everybody your social information, like your Instagram, Facebook, where to find you, so if they want to follow you, they can?
So my Instagram is BrockDoc Texas, so BrockDoc Texas. And then my Instagram is just my first and last name, Katrina Lindley. And the other Instagram account is Shot at Dawn Project with Conrad Jeffries that we do. And I also serve on the advisory committee for Centurion Military Alliance, who actually does the transition work. And I know we didn't touch on that, but they do an amazing job. They do it in San Antonio at the base there, do it in Killeen, Texas, and stuff. So what they do is they actually bring the once a month they go through either one, and they bring the actual employers to the whole day training. With some of them are active, some of them are veterans, and the employers teach veterans and these guys how to interview. I realized that you guys have no clue how to interview for a job. Doctors don't know either because we're not used to it. But you guys are really clueless. So do you have these employers tell them, no, don't say that. You want to say this.
Yeah.
And it's really amazing to see the work that they do. And it's just like, it's kind of refreshing to see success stories come to this. So there's a lot that all of us can do.
Well, once again, thank you. And we're going to have to do this again sometime.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. This is all we got for you today. This is Pri out.